Hello there, Year 11. It's another one of Mrs. Sedge's famous videos. I wanted to carry on with Macbeth with you, given that we are at such a crucial sort of opening point here. And I didn't just want to give you worksheets and things to carry on with because it just won't make sense. So the first thing I want you to do now is I would like you to get your copies of Macbeth out. You also need the large A3 sheets out that have got the characters, themes, key quotes and audience reactions on, please. So you need to get those out now. Perfect. I'm now going to get you to read the scene. It's Act 1, Scene 4. We started reading it last lesson, but we didn't get all the way through to the end. So I just want you to take on your parts, please, and I want you to read Act 1, Scene 4. So if the teacher you could pause the video now, that would be great. Right, hopefully you've been paused and you've just read Act 1, Scene 4. Now, just to give you a quick outline, Act 1, Scene 4 takes place at a place called Forres, which is in Scotland, and it's where the leaders of the battle, so we've got Duncan and many of the Thanes, his sons, have all gathered, and it's quite an important scene because we see Duncan heaping praise once again on Macbeth, and also a little banquet, but not quite as much. But it's also very, very important because King Duncan announces that his son, his eldest son Malcolm, is going to become the Prince of Cumberland, and that's the title that you get when you are heir to the throne. Now that's obviously quite important because up until this point, Macbeth has had this belief that fate will take a hand and make him king without him having to do anything at all. And so this point now makes him realise that perhaps that might not happen. And if you notice, there is an aside in the scene where we see a definite turning point in Macbeth. This is really a pivotal moment. You need to get yourself highlighters and pens out now, please, because I'm going to talk you through the scene. I've broken it down into chunks and I've put quite a few notes on there, so I shall talk you through them as you're annotating them, okay? I just need to screen share. And it should be here, except it's not very big. Right, there we go, perfect. Right, so the main things to think about is the fact that the scene begins with a flourish. Now that just means that a trumpet flourish, and it obviously denotes the arrival of the king, and it also sort of indicates Duncan's success in battle. Now the opening of the play, if you remember, has been quite a violent one, and we've seen this whole idea of foul and fair, fair and foul, foul and fair, and we can see here now some of the fairness, so it seems, some of the goodness in the sense that we've got success for the Scottish king, and in some ways this is kind of a bit of sycophanticness, so a bit of kind of pleasing King James I, who of course was the king at the time on the throne when Shakespeare was writing, and we've already talked about this, about the context of it. So as I've said here, that we have the irony of Duncan's opening line where he says, "Is execution done on Cawdor?" So he's asking Malcolm, his eldest son, whether or not the former Thane of Cawdor, if you remember, the traitor who turned against King Duncan, about whether or not he's been executed. And this is quite ironic because it's we don't yet realise this, but it almost becomes the Thane of Cawdor is implies that it's kind of a cursed title, like a poison chalice, and we can see once again that perhaps Duncan doesn't always make the best decisions. Now, as we see here in terms of the context, Duncan's execution of a traitor serves as a warning to those in Shakespeare's audience who might threaten to turn on James I. And if you remember the context, it was only a couple of years before Macbeth was written that the gunpowder plot place was foiled, which intended to blow up James I and the whole of Parliament. So Shakespeare, given that he had such a close affiliation with James I here, he's almost warning the audiences as to what will happen to traitors. Now, if you look at this here, Malcolm, as we've mentioned, is the king's eldest son. He's not in it very much at all in the early parts of the play, but he does become quite important later on, very important, in fact, because he is the rightful king. So by Macbeth doing as he does when he murders Duncan, his father, he is destroying the great chain of being, this divine right of kings, the idea that that the king was God's chosen person on earth. Now, if you look here at the blue part here, this is where Malcolm is talking to his father. Is talking to his father about the execution on the former Thane of Cawdor. And as Malcolm says here, very frankly, he confessed his treasons, implored your highness's pardon, and set forth a deep repentance. Nothing in his life became him like the leaving on it. And here we can see that the former Thane of Cawdor, the outgoing Thane, is actually repentant and very guilty for what he's done. Now, this is quite ironic because Macbeth shows no such guilt at all at the end of the play when his own sins are revealed. So we can see that unlike the original Thane of Cawdor, Macbeth later on shows no guilt and no repentance at all for what he's done. Right, moving down this scene, this small scene then here, if you look at the purple bit, where Malcolm, continuing talking about the original Thane of Cawdor, says to throw away the dearest thing he owed for a careless trifle. In other words, he's thrown away his life as though it's something that's irrelevant, a careless trifle. And this foreshadows how Macbeth also throws away his own life in order to achieve his ambition, which, as we've talked about before, is his fatal flaw. It's the dangerous part of his personality that actually destroys his life. And we can see here that this is perhaps what happened to the original Thane of Cawdor too. Now, here in pink at the bottom of this section here, Duncan says there's no art to find the mind's construction in the face. In other words, there is no ability to be able to read on somebody's face what's going through their mind. And this is a key quote. If you remember, it links into the witches' opening scene where they talk about fair is foul and foul is fair. In other words, somebody could actually be thinking something very different to what's going on their face. Because Lady Macbeth in particular plays the innocent role very much later on over the next couple of scenes in the run-up to her ultimate betrayal of Duncan, as she and Macbeth are planning Duncan's murder. So that's a key quote to actually get down that when we come back to look at your big A3 sheets in a moment. He also says he was a gentleman on whom I built an absolute trust. Now, he's talking here about the original Thane of Cawdor, but it's quite ironic because this is also what Duncan does with Macbeth. So we have to ask ourselves the question, is Duncan too trusting? Or does this just reflect the violence of the context of the time? Is this what was expected? Because kings would be very well protected by their fame. However, they were also greatly targeted by people that wanted their throne. So if your cover teacher can pause just a second there for you on this still, just so that you can get down any notes. Okay, welcome back. Let's have a look at the next scene, the next part of the scene then. And on this scene here, it says, enter Macbeth, Banquo, Ross, Angus, and Duncan begins his welcome to Macbeth by calling him Worthy's cousin. Cousin doesn't mean that you're related to them through blood. In this case, it just means a kinsman, which just means a very close ally, somebody you really rely on. And as I've said here, it's the first time that Duncan greets Macbeth, and there's considerable dramatic irony here because we already know that Macbeth is sort of considering regicide, the murder of a king. Now, he hasn't confirmed this, and if you remember in the previous scene, he did say that that if fate would have him crowned, then he was just probably going to wait for fate to play its course. So he wasn't actually going to do anything, although he has kind of played it over in his mind a little bit, we've suggested. So this part of the section here in black, sorry, where he talks about the sin of my ingratitude, even now lies heavy on me. Duncan here is talking really to Macbeth about how grateful he is and how he can never truly repay what Macbeth did in battle for him. And if you look at the end of that section there in green, where Duncan says, only I have left to say, more is thy due than more than all can pay. It's worth noticing there that we've got a rhyming couplet, which is quite unusual because it's mid-scene. So Shakespeare clearly wants to draw our attention to this point here, and he perhaps wants to draw our attention to it because it's the irony of the fact that Duncan is saying that he can never repay Macbeth for all that he's done because the loyalty that he's shown Duncan and Scotland during war, which of course is hugely ironic, and perhaps in some ways Duncan's gratitude to Macbeth makes him a little bit weak because he's oblivious to Macbeth's disloyalty. A little bit further down then, if you look at the part in blue where Macbeth replies with, your highness's part is to receive our duties, and our duties are to your throne and state children and servants. Macbeth here has been quite sycophantic towards Duncan, and if you remember what the word sycophantic means, it means that he is being very, very a little bit over the top. He's kind of being very, very kind and polite and nice to him in over the top sort of ways. And he's telling Duncan here that really he owes him nothing, and that it's Duncan's right as king to expect such loyalty from his subjects, because of course through the divine right of kings, the king would be God's chosen person on earth, which of course are massively ironic words once again from Macbeth that we've seen all the way through this scene. A little bit further down then, the pink part here, Duncan says, I have begun to plant thee and will labour to make thee full of growing. This, of course, is a metaphor, and it's the idea that Macbeth is almost like a seed that he's planting, and he wants him to grow strong. And when he says about I will and will labour, it just means that Duncan will work to make Macbeth grow into a very strong and noble fame. So he sees Macbeth as what we call a protege, which is kind of his sort of student that he's going to tutor, someone that he's training up towards success. And this could perhaps make Macbeth believed that he could be Duncan's heir to the throne, which of course is coming up at the end of this scene here. So it's almost perhaps as though Macbeth is believing that Duncan might be hinting that he's about to offer him the heir to the throne when anything happens to Duncan. The part in blue at the bottom, where Duncan continues with noble Banquo, that hast no less deserved, nor must be known no less to have done so. Let me enfold thee and hold thee to my heart. Now it's halfway through the scene, if not a little further, and it's only now that Duncan is acknowledging Banquo as part of the battle. And as we saw from the captain's battle report in scene 2, we knew that Macbeth and Banquo were equal in terms of their power and their strength and their ability to overcome the Norwegians and the Scottish rebels. And yet it's only now that Duncan is thanking Banquo. And unlike Macbeth, he has received no title, he's received no honours to thank him for his part in the battle. And as I put down here, maybe this possibly leads to some jealousy on Banquo's part, but certainly it's something that draws perhaps a wedge between the two men. So I'm going to pause that there. If you can just pause the video there a second, just so you can get down any of those notes that you haven't got down. Okay, moving on then to the next part then. Banquo, the part at the top of the page where it says Banquo says, there if I grow, the harvest is your own. Banquo seems to show no outward jealousy at this point towards Macbeth. He's just content to take Duncan's praise. And that either it suggests that he's a far more loyal person than Macbeth, or we could even suggest that perhaps Banquo is able to hide what's on his face, that unlike Macbeth, he's able to kind of hide any deeper feelings, which is something that Duncan has already said, that there's no art to find the mind's construction in the face. Duncan's reply, with my plenteous joys wanton in fullness, seek to hide themselves in drops of sorrow. Duncan here is torn a little between joy at winning the battle and also sorrow at the losses that they'll have achieved in battle in terms of the deaths. So we're coming back to this double-sided comment again of foul and fair, fair and foul. So they won the battle, which was joy, but then they've achieved losses. They've suffered losses in battle, which of course is the sorrow that he talked about. Now, this part here in red is absolutely key to this scene, because Duncan says, no, we will establish our estate upon our eldest Malcolm, whom we name hereafter the Prince of Cumberland. Now, as I said at the start of the video, this is a really key point, because Duncan publicly, in front of the other Thanes, names Malcolm, his eldest son, as his heir to the throne, giving him the title of Prince of Cumberland. Now, this wouldn't be a surprise, because it would be expected that the king's eldest son would be heir to the throne. In some cases, if perhaps a king didn't believe that his children were strong enough, he would, oh, excuse me, little sneezer. The king might actually give the heir to the throne named as somebody else, somebody he thought was stronger to take on the throne. And so perhaps at the start of the scene, when Duncan was praising Macbeth, as I said earlier, Macbeth may have thought that perhaps Duncan was going to name him as heir to the throne. So this might actually shock Macbeth a little bit, who might have assumed that he would be named heir, which of course will fulfil the witch's final prophecy about he should be king hereafter. Now, the little part in purple here, where Duncan says, "From hence to Inverness and bind us further to you," Duncan here is announcing that they'll be travelling to Inverness and staying at Macbeth's castle on the way. That's when he says, "Bind us further to you." Now, this would be quite common because, of course, the Thanes' castles would be open to the king. There would be nowhere safe for him to stay on the way up. It would be a long journey, and it's safer for him to actually stop at one of the castles, his Thanes' castles, than it is to camp out in the open air. So this is really, really important because it puts Duncan in Macbeth's trust and care when he visits him inside the castle the following night. Now, at the bottom, Macbeth replies with, I'll be myself the harbinger and make joyful the hearing of my wife with your approach. So humbly take your leave. Now, Macbeth humbly leaves Duncan, saying that he will be the messenger or the harbinger for his wife and write to her about Duncan's visit to the castle. And Lady Macbeth is actually reading a letter in the next scene, but the letter that she reads at the start is not the one about the messenger. That doesn't come until a bit later in the scene. So if your teacher can pause the video here, just so you can get these notes down, and move on to the final page of this scene. Duncan addresses Macbeth as "my worthy Cawdor." Now, of course, this is hugely ironic because Duncan's final words here to Macbeth before Macbeth's aside are full of praise and gratitude. And there's also an element of possession here because he calls him "my worthy Cawdor." So this is high praise here from Duncan. Now, notice here, as we've put in the in red here, where he talks about in an aside. This, of course, as we know, an aside is where a character speaks aloud to himself or to the audience, whilst other characters are on stage but can't hear it. And look at how quickly Macbeth's attitude changes now that he's been told that Malcolm is to be Duncan's heir. So he says, "The Prince of Cumberland, that is a step on which I must fall down or else o'erleap, but in my way it lies. Stars, hide your fires, let not light see my black and deep desires." So the first part here in green, Macbeth is acknowledging his anger at Malcolm's title. And he realizes that he must either fall on this, which means to give up his hopes of being king, or he needs to overleap it, in other words, jump over it and continue his dreams or his hopes of being king. Now look at the tone and the mood change here, where he says, "Stars, hide your fires, let not light see my black and deep desires." Now, stars were thought to be little peepholes from heaven down to earth, as with God looking down on earth. And Macbeth here wants the stars to hide their fires, in other words, not shine, so that God doesn't see his black and deep desires, which suggests that his thoughts have really quickly turned to evil and wickedness. And so this is a really key turning point for Macbeth, because I think he was expecting to be named as heir to Duncan's throne and so fulfill the witches' prophecies, but of course this hasn't happened, and this is where his ambition starts to take over. So when Macbeth exits, this is for him to send a message to his wife that Duncan will be staying at their castle that night, and so he exits, and Duncan continues talking to Banquo. He says, "True, worthy Banquo, he's full so valiant, and in his commendations I am fed. It is a banquet to me." So Duncan here is clearly mid-conversation with Banquo, where he's continuing to praise Macbeth to Banquo, which makes Macbeth's disloyalty and treason even worse, because Duncan really very clearly trusts Macbeth at this point in the play. The metaphor of the banquet here, where he says about "I am fed, it is a banquet to me," suggests that Duncan is full from all the loyalty from Macbeth. Is filled to the brim. And it's also ironic reference to later in the play in Act 3, Scene 2, where we have a very famous banquet scene where the ghost of Banquo returns to haunt Macbeth. Duncan's final reference here is a reference to Macbeth, where he refers to as a peerless kinsman. Peerless just means without equal. So in other words, he's saying that Duncan is saying that in his eyes, no one can match up Macbeth's loyalty. And this, again, is ironic, especially if we think about this image of the idea of foul and fair, or fair and foul. So that's Act 1, Scene 4. You now need to get out your big A3 sheets with the themes and characters on them. I have put some ideas down here for you. First thing's been about Duncan in this scene, because it shows his naivety and trust in Macbeth. He announces Malcolm as his heir, which unwittingly seals his own death. In other words, he doesn't realise that by naming his own son as his heir, this is effectively sealing his death warrant, because it's this. This is the final straw in Macbeth's idea to kill the king. We also meet Malcolm properly for the first time as the king's eldest son. He's a minor character now, as I said, but he does become quite important later, so it's worth noting Malcolm as a character here. Macbeth seems outwardly loyal to Duncan, but he changes very quickly when Duncan announces his heir, which shows that he's not prepared to wait for fate to take over. And it highlights his ambition, which of course we've discussed as being his fatal flaw. Banquo is briefly mentioned, but he's overlooked by the king, and possibly there's a thread of jealousy that could come through here. And then looking at themes, we've also got loyalty and disloyalty with regards to Macbeth and Banquo's treatment of the king. We've got this growing theme of regicide, which is of course is the killing of the monarch. We've got Macbeth's ambition, which causes his fatal flaw because he isn't prepared to wait for fate to take its course. We've got the idea of success in battle. We've got jealousy from Macbeth to Malcolm, and also from Banquo to Macbeth. And we've got this idea of the divine right of kings. So once again, if your cover teacher can just pause that screen for a moment, just so that you can get those ideas down on your big sheet. If you've got any more that you want to add, of course, please add those as well, so that you're building up your own ideas as we go along. So if your cover teacher can just pause the video there for a moment, so that you can write down those notes on character and theme. Okay, moving on then to the next two columns, where we see key quotes and audience reactions. Now, the key quotes are put 4 down here, and it's really important you get these key quotes down. The first one is that there's no art to find the mind's construction in the face. He was a gentleman on whom I built an absolute trust. Said by Duncan about the original Thane of Cawdor, but of course it could also apply to Macbeth by the end of the play. It shows this idea of people perhaps looking one way on their face, but then something very different is going on inside their thoughts or inside their mind. It also suggests Duncan's naivety, because he didn't realise that the original Thane of Cawdor was disloyal, and he also doesn't realise the same thing is happening with Macbeth. The second quote is, "No, we will establish our estate upon our eldest Malcolm," again said by Duncan. And this is a key quote, because this is the turning point for Macbeth. This is when he realises that fate perhaps won't crown him as quickly as he intended. And it also shows this state of impatience from Macbeth. The third quote then, "The Prince of Cumberland, that is a step on which I must fall down or else I will leap," said by Macbeth, this time in the aside. And it's important because he realised that either he will fall at this first hurdle and never become king, or he's got to do something about it. And then the final quote is, "Stars, hide your fires, let not light see my black and deep desires." This is a key quote because we can really see a very quick turning point here from Macbeth. He's gone from very, very loyal, overtly loyal, and very complimentary towards Duncan at the start of the scene, to now suddenly he's asking heaven to hide its light, to hide its hope, and for God not to see these black and deep desires. And that word desire is quite a strong word, because it suggests that the idea of becoming king is now something that he desires, that he wants quite passionately, quite strongly. So in terms of audience's reactions, there will probably be surprise or intrigue at that sudden change of attitude. There'll probably be fear for Duncan's safety, and perhaps Malcolm's too, because if Malcolm has been named Prince of Cumberland, then we want to know what happens to him in order for Macbeth to become king. There's perhaps shock at Malcolm being made heir to the throne, because we perhaps assume that, like Macbeth, that maybe fate would step in here and that he will be named the new king, or the future king. And then obviously concern not just for Duncan's naivety, but also for his safety, given that he's announced that he's going to visit Macbeth's castle that night. So if you can pause that screen for a moment, just so you can get those quotes down. Don't forget you can add any more of your own. So pause it please now. I just realised I've got this in the wrong order. Never mind. Right, so Act 1, Scene 5 now. So if you can pause the video again, please, and if you can read Act 1, Scene 5. Now, in this scene, it's the first time that we meet Lady Macbeth, and at the start of the scene, she is reading a letter. So everything that's in speech marks for the first half of her opening speech, or her soliloquy, is she's reading directly from the letter that Macbeth sent her, telling her about the witches, their prophecies, and also about the king's new honour of him being made Thane of Cawdor. If you notice, the first part of what she speaks at the opening is not in iambic pentameter because, of course, she's reading from a letter. When the speech marks close about halfway through, it turns into a soliloquy. And if you remember, a soliloquy is where a character speaks on their own on stage with nobody else around. It's usually quite a lengthy piece of speech, and it's where that they're thinking aloud, and we, the audience, are allowed to see what's going on inside their thoughts. And it's quite interesting, actually, that Lady Macbeth, as a female character, is the first to have a soliloquy, which would be quite unusual. And perhaps Shakespeare is trying to show just how powerful that he wants her to be perceived as a character. Notice as well the way that she calls on the spirits to kind of to take away her femininity, to unsex her. So there's an awful lot of power and darkness and wickedness that we see. Have a look as well about what happens when Macbeth arrives, because this is where, first of all, she has a messenger from Macbeth telling her that the king is arriving that night at their castle, which of course makes things a little bit, having to speed up a bit, because she's got this idea of killing the king, but this is their one golden opportunity that arrives that night, so she has to act quickly. When Macbeth enters the scene and she starts talking about, she talks about the killing of the king, when she talks about Duncan's fatal entrance. Of course, the word fatal refers to death. So it's Lady Macbeth herself that introduces the idea of the killing of the king before anything else. Notice the way that Macbeth doesn't really say very much. She tries to pass it off by saying, we will speak further on it. Look as well at how Lady Macbeth is very much in charge of this when she talks about my battlements, my knife. At this point, we as the audience will perhaps assume that Lady Macbeth is the one that's going to take things into her own hands and perhaps carrying out the killing of the king. So if you pause the video now, please, and read Act 1, Scene 5. Right, if you get your books back out again, then please, here with your pens and your highlighters for your annotations. There's quite a lot here because it's quite an important scene. And as I've put at the top in blue here, she's on her own on the stage, so we are perhaps hearing her true feelings. It's the first time we've seen her. As I've said, the first part down to where she says, in fact, the whole of this screen here is the letter that she's reading from Macbeth, and it's telling her about his meeting with the witches and his new title that has been given by King Duncan. So the letter begins from Macbeth with "They met me in the day of success." So it opens with Macbeth telling her about the witches and how he met them on the day that they won the battle, which of course links to this idea of fair and foul, foul and fair. He talks about, I have learned by the perfect his report. Now, Macbeth here shows some naivety and trust in the witches because he refers to the prophecies as the perfect his report. So it suggests that unlike Banquo, who saw perhaps some fear in the witches and something to be concerned about, Macbeth seems to have no worries at all about what the witches told him. He doesn't doubt what they say, and he certainly holds no fear or no concern about it. He goes on to talk about while I stood wrapped in the wonder of it, so while he was excited by the news from the prophecies, came missives from the king who all hailed me Thane of Cawdor, by which title before these weird sisters saluted me. Macbeth is telling his wife here about the prophecies, the witches, and the king's title, all in one sentence. And it shows that he trusts her, which goes against the time period when husbands really were superior to their wives. And it would be very rare for a husband to have this sort of trust and confinement, confiding in his wife in the way that he does. So it suggests at the start of the play that Macbeth and Lady Macbeth have a very strong and very unusually equal relationship. At the start here, I just missed this bit in pink, where he refers to the witches as having more in them than mortal knowledge. Mortal just means people that are human, so non-supernaturals. And by referring to them as more in them than mortal knowledge, Macbeth is acknowledging that they're supernatural, that they have more than mortal knowledge, but he still trusts them. So he acknowledges the fact that they are supernatural from the evil world, but yet he trusts them. But as I put in here, the very last thing that the witches said before Macbeth entered the whole of the play was peace. The charms wound up. So we have to wonder here whether he's simply under their spell, or whether he is just so driven by ambition, and at this point that he doesn't really care about them being supernatural from the dark forces. Linking in to this idea about them being equals, he refers to her as my dear partner of greatness. So not only is he showing affection for her by referring to her as dearest, but he also treats her as an equal by calling her partner of greatness. And it's worth noting that this is very different from later in the play, when things considerably change between the two of them. The part in blue at the bottom where he says, thou mightest not lose the dues of rejoicing by being ignorant of what greatness is promised thee. He's telling her that he sent her this letter because he doesn't want her, he wants her to know about what things are promised her, the greatness that's coming her way. In other words, the role of queen to his king. And it shows that he trusts and respects her, but also perhaps he knows that she's also quite an ambitious person too, as we've already seen. So if you can just pause the video there, please, while you pick up those notes very quickly. And then we'll move on to the next. So this here is the soliloquy that Lady Macbeth gives after she's read the letter. So she's partly talking to Macbeth when she says, "Glance thou art and Cawdor, and shalt be what thou art promised." So she's clearly very determined that he will become king, because she says that he will be king, he shalt be king, as he was promised. And a promise is something that you obviously put quite a lot of trust in, that you believe will happen. So she's obviously putting trust in the witches and belief that he will have what has been promised to him. Notice here that, as I've said, this soliloquy here, it returns to iambic pentameter, but not in the first 4 lines. It doesn't quite conform to the rhythm for the first few lines, which perhaps suggests that she's kind of getting into her rhythm as she goes through this soliloquy. Now, the part in green, this is Lady Macbeth kind of talking aloud her fears for Macbeth, her husband. She says, "Yet I do fear thy nature. It is too full of the milk of human kindness to catch the nearest way." In other words, Lady Macbeth believes that Macbeth is too nice, too full of the milk of human kindness to become king in the quickest way, catch the nearest way. In other words, commit murder. So she thinks that he's ambitious, but she doesn't think that he's evil enough to commit murder. She goes on to say, "Thou wouldst be great, art not without ambition, but without the illness should attend it." In other words, she knows that he will be great because he's got the ambition, but she knows that he's not evil enough. He hasn't got the illness, the evil within him to match his desire to be king and to carry out whatever he needs to do to achieve it. She also says, "Thus that thou must do if thou have it, and that which rather thou dost fear to do than wishes should be undone." Lady Macbeth here knows that he wants success, but she also knows that he fears doing anything bad. So it suggests that Lady Macbeth knows her husband quite well, and perhaps even though he's a very strong man in battle, as we've seen, he perhaps doesn't have the mental capacity to do things to make himself great in another sense. Now, this bit in pink is really quite key. When she says, "Hie thee hither," hie thee hither means hurry up here, "that I may pour my spirits in thine ear, and chastise with the valour of my tongue all that impedes thee from the golden round, which fate and metaphysical aid doth seem to have thee crowned with all." So she's saying, hurry up here. So she wants him to hurry up home quickly. And when she says about that, "I may pour my spirits in thine ear," she just means that she can pour her evil spirits into his ear, in other words, by talking to him. So it's a metaphor for her being able to pour her words into his ear. To chastise somebody just means to tell them off or to push them along. So she wants to chastise with the valour of her tongue, to chastise with the power of her words, all that impedes or stops Macbeth from the golden round, which of course is a metaphor for the crown. So she wants him to hurry up there so she can talk him into everything that's stopping him from killing the king. And she refers to it as which fate and metaphysical aid, in other words, the witches, seem to already have him crowned. So she's kind of saying he's more or less crowned king already by fate and by the witches. So she just wants to give him that final little push to get him on his way, because she perhaps knows that he's too nice, too full of the milk of human kindness to commit murder. So the messenger enters, and she asks him, "What are your tidings? So what is your message?" And he says, "The king comes here tonight." Now, this message, of course, plays right into Lady Macbeth's hands, because it means that she has the king in her house unexpectedly just for this one night. So she realised that she must act quickly. So if you can just pause the video there, just so you can catch up those notes, please. And then moving on to the next part then. So Lady Macbeth is quite shocked. I mean, she says to the messenger, "Thou art mad to say it. Is not thy master with him? Who, were it so, would have informed for preparation." So she's questioning the messenger's accuracy here, because she believes that Macbeth would have told her himself. He didn't put it in the letter that she's just read about the witches and about the title. So it's all quite shocking for her. But the messenger assures her that it's true when she says, "So please you, it is true. Our Thane is coming. One of my fellows had the speed of him." That just means that they would have had messengers on horseback who would have been much quicker than perhaps the Thane. So these are people that were kind of like postmen, I suppose, really sending messages quite quickly to and forth. So here in green, where the messenger exits, everything that she speaks now until Macbeth enters show her true feelings, because once again she's speaking on her own, and it really shows her very evil nature at this point, early point in the play. But then we have to ask ourselves: is she truly evil, or are these all just words? And the more that we go into the play, the more that we realise that Lady Macbeth is just a person of words. She never actually commits any single act of violence. Everything just comes from her words and the way that she prompts and pushes Macbeth into doing the actions. So when the messenger exits, she says, "The raven himself is hoarse that croaks the fatal entrance of Duncan under my battlements." Now, a raven is a large black bird that's normally associated with death and evil, and they're often found in graveyards, apparently. And she's basically saying that the black bird, this raven, is croaking himself hoarse as he croaks the entrance of Duncan under her battlements. And notice how she talks about Duncan's fatal entrance. Now, fatal just means leading to death. And look at the way that she refers to the castle as my battlements, not our battlements. So it shows that she's very much in control of the relationship at this point. So words like fatal and raven both imply that she's planning Duncan's death, even though she hasn't openly said it, although the word fatal entrance, is kind of an oxymoron, because fatal means leading to death, whereas entrance suggests an opening, a welcoming. So it's very clear at this point that even though she hasn't spoken to Macbeth, she's planning Duncan's murder. Now, this next part here, she calls on the evil spirits when she says, "Come, you spirits that tend on mortal thoughts, unsex me here and fill me from the crown to the toe, top full of direst cruelty." So at this point, she's calling on the evil spirits. It's almost like a chant or an incantation. And she's calling on the evil spirits to unsex her. She wants to become less feminine, because in this time, being a woman would be seen as very, very weak. So she wants them to unsex her, to take away her gender as a female gender. And she wants to be filled instead with direst cruelty. Direst means the worst. So she wants to be filled with cruelty. But this is really important, because she's asking the spirits to do this to her. So it suggests at this point she's not filled with evil at the moment. It's just all words. She's calling on the spirits to fill her with this cruelty. She goes on to say, "Make thick my blood and stop up the access and passage to remorse, that no compunctious visitings of nature shake my fell purpose, nor keep peace between the effect and gift." So at this point, she's asking the spirits to stop her feeling remorse or guilt, because she knows that the ability to feel remorse and guilt might stop her. It might shake her fell purpose. So stop her doing what she's planning. So the fact that she's asking the spirits to stop the ability to feel remorse and guilt, again shows that at this point in the play, she does feel guilt. So she wants the evil spirits to remove those feelings from her. So even though this all sounds very dark and very wicked and very evil, she's calling on these spirits to fill her with this evil that at the moment she doesn't believe that she has. She goes on to say, "Come to my woman's breasts and take my milk for gall, you murdering ministers." So she's calling on the evil spirits again here, to take her milk for poison or gall. So she wants to feel no feminine feelings at all because she believes that they make her weak. And breastfeeding obviously is a key symbol of being female. So she wants her milk to be taken and replaced with poison. And this is a slight point here because it suggests that Lady Macbeth must have recently had a child in order to have milk. But no child is ever actually mentioned at all in the play, apart from later on with Macbeth. But there's no child that ever actually occurs on stage. We don't know whether perhaps she's recently had a child but has lost the child, which some more modern productions of it have used as kind of motivation for Lady Macbeth's perhaps quite disturbed state of mind. Notice the way that she keeps saying, come to my woman's breasts, come thick night. It's almost inviting the evil spirits to her, almost like a chant or an incantation. She carries on by saying, "Come thick night and pall thee in the dunnest smoke of hell, that my keen knife sees not the wound it makes, nor heaven peep through the blanket of the dark to cry, hold, hold." So she wants thick night, so she wants the darkness to come without any stars from heaven. A pall is a kind of like a piece of fabric or flag that we placed over a coffin. So it's the idea that it's almost like she wants to kind of cover heaven with this funeral blanket, so that these evil deeds usually take place at night in darkness, as we saw with Jekyll and Hyde. So she doesn't want heaven through the stars to see her keen knife, Bill Duncan. But notice how she refers to it as my keen knife. So at this point, it implies that she's the person that's planning to do the murder of herself. But it's also worth noticing, perhaps, that she doesn't want God to see. So at this point, perhaps she is still God-fearing, and she understands that what she's doing is wrong. This is regicide. This is killing God's chosen person on earth. So she wants this blanket to come down from heaven so that no one can cry, hold, hold. The words no one from heaven, perhaps God can make her stop and tell her to stop. So Macbeth enters here. It's the first time that we actually see Macbeth and Lady Macbeth together, and it's quite interesting when we see the dynamics of them as a couple. She continues when she sees him with great glams, worthy caudle, greater than both by the all hail hereafter. Now this is interesting because look at how Lady Macbeth greets Macbeth using the same words as the witches, about glams, caudle, king, and all hail. So we have to ask ourselves what this implies. Is there perhaps a connection between Lady Macbeth and the witches? It's long been the belief that Lady Macbeth is perhaps the fourth witch. I don't believe that that's true because I think that she has too many human feelings, and certainly later on in the play, about halfway through, she massively loses her power and certainly loses her influence over Macbeth. So I would suggest that she's not necessarily the fourth witch, but perhaps she's maybe been somehow controlled by them without realising it, or maybe it's pure coincidence. Later, Macbeth goes on to say that thy letters have transported me beyond the ignorant present, and I feel now the future in the instant. So Lady Macbeth is clearly far more ambitious than her husband because she's thinking about the future in an instant. In other words, them becoming king and queen very, very quickly. So we can see just how ambitious that she is. Macbeth greets her lovingly when he says, "My dearest love," but he doesn't acknowledge it when she talks about feeling the future in the instant. All he says is, "Duncan comes here tonight." So Duncan's visit is, not only is it playing straight into Lady Macbeth's hands, but perhaps it's playing on Macbeth's mind. He knows that Duncan's attendance at their castle is a key moment, and it's the first thing that he says to her. Lady Macbeth's first question is, "And when goes hence?" In other words, when does he leave? Tomorrow, as he purposes. Lady Macbeth is the one asking questions. Now, often when somebody asks questions, it means that they're not in control, but in this case, she is, because she's trying to find out all the information. And when he says tomorrow, as he purposes, Duncan is only staying one night, so they need to act fast. Now, this is the real point in the play where the audience realises exactly what Lady Macbeth is planning, because she says, "Oh, never shall sun that morrow see." In other words, Duncan's face will never see the sun again. It won't see tomorrow. And this is the first time, she's the first person to openly state that they're going to kill Duncan. But notice that Macbeth says nothing. Does he agree, or is he just happy to let her take charge? We're not quite sure at this point. Now, She goes on to say, your face, my fame, is as a book where men may read strange matters. So this simile here, where his face is as a book, like a book, where men may read strange matters, she is telling Macbeth that his thoughts are very clearly showing on his face. So for her to say that, Macbeth's facial expression was clearly showing that he's not happy about what she's saying. So perhaps he may be showing shock. So she's concerned that his face might give him away. She gives him some advice where she says, look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it. Now, this is a really key quote, because Lady Macbeth is telling Macbeth here to look like an innocent, just like a flower, but then act like a serpent, snake in the grass. And this is actually a biblical reference to the Garden of Eden, where, if you remember, it was the serpent in the Garden of Eden that tempted I've forgotten the name, Eve, bite into the apple. So it's this idea of being like a serpent, like a snake in the grass, is the idea of being evil underneath the flower. And it links, of course, to the idea of fair and foul. Foul is fair. So the words look fair, but be foul underneath it. And this is exactly what Lady Macbeth is able to do, that perhaps Macbeth isn't quite able to do at this point in the play as easily. She goes on to say, ironically, she said, he that's coming must be provided for. Now, the he that's coming, of course, is Duncan. Now, provided for obviously means the banquet, but of course, it's quite ironic as well, because she's perhaps talking about his murder. And she says, you shall put this night's great business into my dispatch. Now, is she talking about the banquet feast, or is she talking about the murder? But if we perhaps take it that she's talking about the murder, it shows that she's telling him to leave the planning in her hands. She's taking charge at this point. But later, she actually backs out of the actual murder. But look at how, once again, she keeps saying my dispatch, my keen knife, my battlements. Macbeth's only response to it is, we will speak further. Now, he neither agrees nor disagrees with the plan. He just says they'll talk about it further later on. Is he backing out? Is he stalling for time? Is he being a coward, or does he actually want to plan it further? We're not quite sure, because he gives nothing away here. He only responds to some of the lengthier things that he says. And look at how she is dominant in this scene. She has the majority of the speech that takes place here. And it's worth noting at the end, we have a rhyming couplet where she says, to alter favour ever is to fear, leave all the rest to me. So it ends with a rhyming couplet with only to look up clear, to alter favour ever is to fear. And then we have that single line on its own. The rhythm, by the way, is lost. It's no longer iambic pentameter, which perhaps suggests that Shakespeare really wants to draw our attention to this closing remark where she talks about leave all the rest to me. And notice, as I said, the way that she takes the majority of the speech in this conversation. So if we just pause the video here then, please, just to get these notes down. Right, you then need your big sheet out once again so that we can put in your comment boxes for Act 1, Scene 5. So the two main characters that we see here are Lady Macbeth, where it's the first time we meet her. She's very, very forthright and very powerful. She commands the evil spirits to help her. Perhaps, however, she's not as wicked as she seems, since she's asking for these things and for her to be filled with these things rather than already being filled with them. She's possibly had a child recently, but maybe has lost it. She dominates Macbeth. She uses the word my a lot, and she seems to be planning to carry out the murder when Macbeth hasn't even mentioned it yet. Macbeth seems weak in comparison to Lady Macbeth. He treats her as his equal, which goes very much against the context of the time when we think about male-female relationships. He doesn't say very much. And is he agreeing with the murder, or is he just keeping silent for now? We're not quite sure. In a couple of scenes' time, we actually see his response when he tells her that they will proceed no further in this business. He doesn't want to carry out the killing. So it seems that perhaps at the end of this scene, he's thinking over it, he's ruminating over what to do next. So in terms of themes, then we see ambition, more from Lady Macbeth perhaps than Macbeth. Evil and supernatural, as Lady Macbeth calls on the spirits to give her power. There's also this idea of femininity and masculinity, and these concepts of femininity and masculinity would have been much more defined in Shakespeare's time, and certainly in Macbeth's time, going back to the 12th century, than they are today. We see this idea of power and weakness and regicide. We see guilt when she talks about not wanting to feel remorse, and then we have this idea of heaven and hell that comes in. So if you can just pause the video there, please, just while you get those notes down. And then the key quotes. There are quite a few here, so you will have to push these into your box, write quite small. Get some post-it notes if you need to put them on. The first one is my dearest partner of greatness, which of course is a key quote because it shows that Macbeth treats Lady Macbeth as his equal. Lady Macbeth says, I fear thy nature, it is too full of the milk of human kindness to catch the nearest way. So it suggests that Lady Macbeth knows her husband well and knows that he's too kind, too nice to commit murder. But look at the way she uses the euphemism to catch the nearest way rather than saying the word to commit murder. The next one is, hie thee hither that I may pour my spirits in thine ear and chastise with the valour of my tongue all that impedes thee from the golden round. And this is key because she's calling on him to hurry to her so that she can pour her evil words into him, into his ear, and make him, through her words, through the valour of her tongue, get over everything that impedes him or stops him from taking the crown through force. The raven himself is hoarse that croaks the fatal entrance of Duncan under my battlements. This is the first true acknowledgement of murder when she talks about raven and fatal entrance of Duncan under my battlements. Come you spirits that tend on mortal thoughts, unsex me here. This is where she's trying to get rid of her femininity because she believes it makes her weak. Now, up until this part in the play, we've been surrounded by men only in the context of the battle scenes. We've got a very masculine environment. There aren't many other women in the play at all. There's a couple of gentle women and a nurse. And then there's Macduff's wife that appears much later on just for a very short scene. And obviously the witches are quite ambiguous in terms of whether they're male or female because they're supernatural beings. But she acknowledges the fact here that being feminine makes her weak. Come thick night and pour thee in the dunnest smoke of hell, that my keen knife sees not the wound it makes. Oh, I've lost my screen. Here we are. So this here is where she's talking about the darkness to come so that she can perform this murder. And it links this idea of heaven and hell, the fact that she doesn't want heaven to see what's going on because it's a very hellish act that she's committing. Oh, never shall sun that morrow see. This, of course, is a euphemism for the murder of Duncan, the fact that he won't see the next day. A key quote here where she says, look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it. That's an image that we keep coming back to time and time again, this idea of looking like one thing, but being something very different underneath. We've talked previously about the equivocation of the witches, this ability to juggle words. And Lady Macbeth is implying something quite similar, this idea of juggling what can be read on your face with the words that you're using. Her final line is leave all the rest to me, which suggests that she's taking control here. But later on, we find out that she doesn't. She's not able to commit the murder. And then in terms of the audience's reactions, we can see fear perhaps of Lady Macbeth's growing power and her influence over Macbeth. We perhaps feel concern for Duncan because it's the first time that his death has been openly mentioned. We've got further fear of the supernatural because this is really quite a dark scene, especially when she's calling on the spirits to unsex her and to fill her with evil. And then finally, maybe some excitement from the audience because this is what we're leading up to. This is a tragedy. This is we know that something negative is going to happen. We're assuming that the death is going to take place quite soon. So we do have this excitement of the upcoming scenes. They were the best view. So if you just pause it there just to get those final notes on your big sheets. Right, I'm going to stop share so you can see me again. There we go. If there is any time left at the end of this lesson, because it was a double lesson, because you've hopefully got through quite a lot there, and there should be a video of Macbeth on my shelf next to my desk. If there is any time left, you can maybe watch the first couple of scenes. I don't need to go any further though than this scene. It's really important you don't go any further, otherwise you won't understand what's going on. If there is any further time left in the lesson after that, what I'd like you to do is to perhaps start doing some cue cards to put some of the key quotes on there so that you're learning those. So I will do another one of these for next lesson. I'm sure you'll be delighted to see me again. I hope you're all okay, and I shall see you in about 2 weeks.